Welcome to the Gab Talks by the Independent Press Award. I'm your hostess, Gabby Olzak. To participate in the 2025 Book Award competitions, please visit independentpressaward.com and nycbigbookaward.com. On this episode of the Gab Talks, we will be chatting with R.W. Meek, author of The Dream Collector, Book 2, Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh, a distinguished favorite in the 2024 New York City Big Book Award. The Dream Collector Book 2 was also awarded the 2024 New York City Big Book Award for book cover design fiction. R.W. Meek has a master's degree in art history from the American University in Washington, D.C. His areas of expertise are Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, with a particular interest in Vincent van Gogh. He has interned and hosted tours at the National Museum of American and the National Gallery of Art. His first multiple award-winning novel, The Dream Collector, Sabrine and Sigmund Freud, was voted runner-up by the Historical Fiction Company for Best Novel of 2022. The author, Ron, has also won the Palm Beach Book Festival competition for Best Writer in Palm Beach. His manuscript was judged by a panel of New York Times best-selling authors. Originally from Baltimore, Ron joins us from Santa Clarita, California, where he lives with his wife, Pamela. His passions include art, cinema, literature, and jazz. Hey, mine too. His two dogs, Rev and Banjo, were awarded angelic status in heaven. Oh, poor little guys. Congratulations, Ron, and welcome to the Gab Talks.
Thank you, Gabby. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you too. So let's dive right into it. The Dream Collector Book 2, Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh, is set in Paris in 1886, a culturally, intellectually, and scientifically significant period in French history. Um, who is the Dream Collector? Tell us how you came up with the title. It refers to your protagonist, Julie Forette, who was
Correct.
introduced in Book
Correct.
1,
Yes.
Sabrine and Sigmund Freud. So tell us about her, Ron.
Well, first off, Sigmund Freud is a major character in my novel, and of course, one of the things he's famous for is interpreting dreams. His theory was that dreams kind of reveal our hidden desires, whether they're dark or bright. So I wanted a way to bring in that aspect of Sigmund Freud. So I decided to use Julie Forette as a stand-in for Sigmund Freud. So throughout the story, she collects the dreams of interesting people that she meets, who are prominently artists. So Sabrine, throughout the novel, will collect the dreams of Paul Cézanne, Paul Gauguin, Toulouse-Lautrec, and especially Vincent van Gogh. And her aim
All of
is to
these
find
artists.
out from their one important dream that she collects, what is it in that dream that kind of reveals who they are, where they're going. So that's how the title came about.
Okay, so Julie Forette, our Dream Collector. So one reviewer said of the Dream Collector, Ron, particularly Book 2, Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh, that it's a mesmerizing ode to love, art, and human obsession. But I want to hear your synopsis of your novel.
My synopsis of the novel, I've written so many synopses of this book, but really, deep down, it's about two sisters who are trying to overcome trauma from the past. And they're trying really to find themselves, and they find themselves in probably the most exciting time period in history. They're in Paris, in late 19th century. And so the synopsis is these two people encounter many artists during this time period, and also Sigmund Freud, who had been treating Sabrine at the Salpêtrière Asylum for women. So it's their journey. It's a journey to understand themselves. And in particular, I wanted to, because it's Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh, I wanted to explore who Vincent van Gogh was. So
So
that's
the two, excuse me, Ron, the two main protagonists, Julie and Sabrine, the sisters, as you mentioned, um, you say in your author's note that these two protagonists were fictionalized, but they're historical amalgams of real women who were often marginalized in the telling of
exactly.
history. I found that so interesting. Why did you choose to highlight these types of women?
Well, I'm an art historian, so I've done a lot of research uh, on artists, and I found that it seems that the women artists are always marginalized. Like if you think back to the Impressionists, maybe Mary Cassatt is probably the one who kind of escaped being marginalized thanks to
Well,
Degas. But like people like Berta Morisot or Suzanne Valadon, who was eventually became an artist, a lot of people didn't know about them, and so I thought it was important to bring out the talented women of the period. And um, to give you an example, I mean, when I read the letters of Vincent van Gogh to Anteo, the
his brother
and I
Teo.
recommend reading those letters if anybody hasn't read them. It's really an insight into uh, relationship between siblings and artists. And just an example, one of the things that I discovered that when Vincent van Gogh went to Paris to live with his brother, Theo was seeing a woman, and he was having a little bit of trouble with her, and so he decided to, maybe it was time for him to leave Paris for a while and go to the Netherlands. So Vincent was at the apartment. So they exchanged letters back and forth about this woman, but they only referred to her as S. They never gave her name. And that was to me just an example of how women are like partners of some of these people, lovers, mistresses, wives, and they play an important part, but they're marginalized. You never hear about them. So the S was kind of an inspiration for me to create a character who was S, and then
Mm.
she became Sabrine.
Interesting. So, tell us about. I was very interested in the relationships, as you said. Often the women took a back seat to these artists, and not just artists, and just various different career paths. For example, Julie befriends young Sigmund Freud, who is at that point really not the Sigmund Freud that we all know, but he was an apprentice. And tell us about their relationship and how she really is almost a driving force behind him.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted Julie Forette to really have the ideas about uh, the significance of dreams before she meets Freud. And I wanted her to be a stimulus to young Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
And also, another aspect that was happening during that time when Sigmund Freud came to Paris to actually study under a major neurologist, Jean Martin Charcot, what was prevalent at the time was well, it was new. It was using hypnotism for the first time, not as a showman's trick, but as maybe something scientific that we could learn from
Mhm.
the hypnotizing people. And so I decided to have Julie as a master hypnotist who would teach Freud a little bit about hypnotism. So,
See, she was the power behind the man, wasn't she?
yes, yes,
Sh She really was. So her sister Sabrine really became let's just set the scene a little bit. Julie basically breaks Sabrine out of an institution where she was being treated behind the scenes by Sigmund Freud. That's where we enter into book 2, correct?
yes, yes.
Okay. She takes Sabrine to Paris, and Sabrine becomes enveloped in the art scene. In fact, she's dubbed the Haiku Princess and develops somewhat of a cult following. I understand that you received an award for your poetry, Ron, in the book.
Yes, it's one of my most delightful awards. I
Yeah, tell
I
us
was
about that.
I don't know how it came about. I mean, it was called the Firebird Awards, and I had already won an award. Uh, Both books actually won first and second for best historical fiction, and then they decided that it was time to create awards for kind of unique aspects of the book. So when I heard that they were inviting books for like the best use of poetry, I said, "Wow, this book belongs to I should have that award." So I
As you
submitted it, and there are a lot of poetry in the book. And I will say, I'm not a poet, and you hear sometimes you hear writers say, "Well, oh, I wrote this stuff. It was like a channel. It just came through me." And that's never been my experience with writing. Writing has been really tough for me. You know, I have to like chisel out each line, but not for the poetry. Somehow I did channel somebody or something. It just seemed I channeled Sabrine's psychic the way that maybe she would compose poetry. And it helped me understand Sabrine better. So
That's
it was
incredible. So,
fun. That was a fun part of the book, the poems.
would you say that I think The Dream Collector is a love story. Would you say that that's one of the more prominent themes of the novel?
Yes, love, and how love between siblings. I was
Mm.
very intrigued by the relationship between Vincent van Gogh and his brother Theo.
And that inspired you to create the
And then I wanted
sisterhood.
a mirror. I wanted another relationship to mirror that relationship. So that became Sabrine and Julie and their relationship. So throughout the book, it's the love between siblings and
Mm,
how that can either be a channel, a positive thing, or sometimes in the case of Theo and Vincent, it became a little too extreme
mhm.
and it became destructive in the end. But I think for the girls, they fared a lot better than the boys did in their
Now
sibling relation.
another important they certainly did. Another important relationship, Ron, was obviously between Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh. They're both volatile, both very self-destructive. How did you approach their relationship?
How did I approach
The
the
relationship in
relationship?
the novel. Yes, why did you decide to pair those 2? Was it because of their similar personalities?
Yes, yes, exactly. They were both troubled spirits, and they had demons that they hid, especially Sabrine. And so I wanted to be able to get those two together and kind of see what would happen, how they would react to each other, because to bring out their similar qualities, they were very spontaneous, uh, and so very often they're together, and it's a tumultuous relationship. The way I once described it was like uh, fire meeting air, like the fire being Vincent and the air being Sabrine. She's kind of airy, fairy like. And
Fueling it.
so we know what happens with fire and air, they explode.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. You know, you're a historian, and of course you've won multiple awards as in for these novels as historical fictions. You masterfully recreate this very significant and exciting period in French history, and you include a ton of historical figures: Sigmund Freud, impressionist and post-impressionist artists like Cézanne, Gauguin, and also leaders of the literary movement like Émile Zola. How did you balance, and by the way, I really love the way at the back of the book in your appendix, you list all of these historical figures, and then you give a little synopsis of how they relate in the book, which I thought that was really fantastic. How, Ron, did you balance the historical accuracy with the creative fiction when you depicted all of these real life figures?
An important epigraph in my novels, The Dream Collector, uh, was kind of my lodestar. Um, this is the truth. This is not the truth.
Right.
This is the holy truth. And what I meant by that is The Dream Collector is based solidly on facts. I spent
Okay.
many years researching these people.
Mhm.
And how it expanded was the incredible thing was I wanted to know why Sigmund Freud came to Paris in 1886. I wanted to know why Vincent van Gogh came to Paris in 1886.
So
So I had to
curiosity and
learn who did they come to see? Who did they interact with? So the list started to grow. Like Sigmund Freud came to Jean Martin Charcot. I didn't know who Jean Martin Charcot was, but the more I learned about him, the more intriguing he became. And so it became that these people were integrated into the lives of Freud and Vincent, but they were like marvelous characters in themselves. So I kept it was a lot of
adding
quite a few
characters.
years of research, but I just got wrapped up into trying to get the essence and the most interesting facts about all these people because it was all in the same time period. You know,
Circle.
they were
You
all
all the
together,
same
walking the
circle,
streets together,
yeah.
meeting each other. So the fun was trying to link up a plot to bring out all of these facts together. So that's why when I say it's the holy truth, it's sometimes you take a fact, but then you enhance it to get the essence of what that
Right.
fact and the significance of that fact, you know.
Well, it makes for a very interesting story, I'll say that. And in your introduction, Ron, we noted that you have a particular interest in Van Gogh for most of your life.
Yes.
Um, I've interviewed several authors who have written books about Van Gogh, and I myself, I lived in Paris when I was in college, and how could you not be intrigued by Van Gogh and his life? What was it about him for you?
Well, Gabby, it was the art. Yeah. He wasn't
Yeah.
the first artist I came to. Let me give you a little backdrop. I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood, blue collar, and in my house there was no art. About the only art we had was maybe a calendar from a funeral company, and usually they were of a religious subject. So I came to art on my own. Fortunately, in Baltimore, we had the Baltimore Museum of Art. And so at some point in my life, early teenage life, I started going to the museum and I just loved the paintings. And the first painter I really liked was Paul Gauguin.
Hmm.
And but as time went on, uh, I I went to the University of Maryland, and so I was near D.C. So every chance I had, I would go to the National Gallery of Art, and there I got really intrigued by Vincent van Gogh because there were quite a few paintings by him, and um, I just took to him. I just not so much his life in the beginning because I didn't know anything about Vincent van
Yeah.
Gogh, but just the intensity, the color, the brushwork. He just stood out to me as just so different than anyone else. It just the vibration, the energy. So, and one thing I should point out that maybe people don't know, but it took me a while to discover this, but Vincent van Gogh never stood still. You know, you kind of want to lump everything together, but he had a trajectory. And actually, he started very late in life. He started at the age of 30, uh,
Painting.
totally supported by his brother the
Really?
whole time. And he just developed. He developed. It kept changing. And each point, like, because he was from the Netherlands, he was very influenced by, like, Rembrandt. and some of his early paintings were dark, but extremely well designed. If you look at some of his drawings, they're meticulous. They're just so. But when he went to Paris, he had no idea who the Impressionists were. His brother was an art dealer, and his brother Teo said, "You better come to Paris. There's some stuff here happening." And he knew his brother was very talented and was going in a certain direction. But once he came to Paris, he like he just absorbed it so quickly, and he absorbed the Impressionist, the Pointillist, and he developed his own unique style. And then he kept developing until his final days. He, you know, he was just the last
Working.
100 paintings were just they kept moving in different directions.
He was
So
developing his he was developing himself as an artist until he
never
died.
stood still, never
Never
stood
stood
still.
still. Interesting way to say that. He's often portrayed by the whole world as a tortured artist, which I don't think we can really dispute that. But does the Dream Collector offer a new perspective on his life and legacy?
I think I explored Vincent van Gogh in depth, and I think I've come to kind of some conclusions that you won't find in other books about him.
Share them with
Uh,
us.
pardon?
Share those conclusions with us. I'd love to hear them.
Well, it was before Vincent was born, a year before Vincent was born, there was another Vincent who was born. And his name was Vincent too. Uh, he was born on March 30th, and he lived a day. He was basically stillborn. So I call him Vincent 1.
Okay.
And the grave, so Vincent was born a year later, the same birthday, the same day, March 30th. So I can imagine a mother who's had a child that she's lost. It's something you never get over with. I'm familiar with certain people that have lost their
Mhm.
children and unexpectedly, and it's just something you don't forget. It's there all the time. So I imagine how growing up there was the specter of Vincent One, always there,
I didn't
and
know
his
that.
grave wasn't that far away. He used to walk to the. His father was a pastor, and then behind the church was the graveyard, and he could see Vincent One all the time. So I think that played a part
That's
on his
really eerie.
psyche.
Yeah, for sure.
So at the end of his life, towards the end, Teo finally found someone to love besides Vincent van Gogh, and he married Joanna Bonger, and she got pregnant, and they told Vincent van Gogh like, "Oh, we're so happy. We're going to name him Vincent after you."
Oh gosh.
So you can imagine now he's been supported by his brother all these years, and now his brother and he loves Teo, and he's really appreciative of all the help. And here's his brother now going to have a child named Vincent, and he's going to have a lot of worries and financial worries. So I think having the third Vincent was the trigger
Hmm.
that set him off to commit suicide.
Hmm.
So, and I don't think that's
That's
been brought out much by other
No, I've
writers.
never I have to say I've never heard that. So since we're on the topic of paintings, you were awarded the 2024 New York City Big Book Award for book cover design. Here it is,
Yes.
folks. Oh, beautiful cover. Look at that.
Yeah.
Um, I want to hear about the painting on the cover, and its relevance to the story. And then I have a couple of other questions. Let's answer this one first.
Okay.
How did you
Well,
tell us about the
first off,
painting on the
hats off, hats off to White Rabbit Arts because they helped design this cover. You know,
Fantastic.
and what I learned about and White Rabbit's art is a subsidiary of Historian Press, my publisher, and the artist in White Rabbit Arts. is D. Marley, who is a treasure. And because I've heard from other people saying, well, my publisher, they didn't give me any control over the cover, and so I wouldn't count on you getting any, control over it. I said, well, I just want to have a little input. So anyway, I worked with D. Marley, and we came up with this cover. And the reason I chose this, I wanted a painting by Vincent van Gogh. That was absolute. So what painting was it going to be out of, 1,000
Yeah.
paintings that he
How did you
made?
choose that? Really?
So this had a very this painting had a very interesting history. When Vincent van Gogh left Paris, he moved to Arles, and after about a month in Arles, he painted what was called the Strolling Lovers, and he was unhappy with it. So he told his brother, I'm destroying the painting. But what historians discovered, he didn't destroy the whole painting. He tore a part of it out, and he kept it. And it's two lovers strolling along the towpath of a canal. And it just intrigued me. Why did he keep it? And so then I got the idea, well, maybe this could be Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh.
So
So I
that
thought,
brings me
I
to
will
my
make
next question.
this, I will use my imagination and
Uh-huh.
say that he painted this of him and Sabrine, and he kept it because they broke up, but he still cared very much for this girl. But they were just two wild cards that couldn't stay together. So it plays an important part in the novel where this is
And that
discovered.
brings me to my next question, Ron. So you have numerous art references in the novels. Did the paintings inspire the story or vice versa? And is there a passage and a particular marriage between a painting and a passage that you would like to share with us?
Could you repeat that again? I just
Yes. You have numerous art references in the novels. Did the paintings inspire the story, or did the story inspire the paintings that you
oh,
chose?
sometimes the painting inspires the story because I learn sometimes about the background of the story of the paintings.
Like in this one, you
So
said, "Oh, this could be Sabrine and Vincent van Gogh."
right, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that was an intriguing thing. Like, why did he? By the way, it's like only about 13 inches.
because he only
Uh,
destroyed part of it. Interesting.
why? So and so a lot of the other paintings intrigued me too. Like, for instance, the cover of Sabrine and Sigmund Freud is a painting by Monet. It's the girl with the green parasol,
Mhm.
very famous. So that painting inspired me to weave a whole story. I had Julie Forette being that model for that
Right,
painting.
right,
So the paintings kind of inspired me to create stories around them.
around it.
Yeah.
So do you have a particular passage from your novel that you would like to share with us that relates to a painting?
Yes, indeed, I do.
Excellent. We'd
Yeah.
love to hear it and see it.
Okay. Um, this is a painting by Vincent van Gogh called The Sower. Um, and in this little small excerpt that I'm going to read, I'm going to describe the painting. But to give you a little backdrop, Julie Forette, one of her own dream becomes to have her own art gallery. She's so passionate about the art that she discovers. She actually comes to Paris more interested in science. But as she says in one of the opening lines in my book, I came for science, but art had her way with me. So she just was passionate about art, so she wanted to have her own art gallery, and she does. She creates it on a shoestring budget, and all the Impressionists help, and they contribute, and
They're all
stock it with
friends.
her work. Yeah. So here's Julie Forette in her art gallery. At dawn, the first rays entering the gallery were purest, a light that gently sought the paintings, slow-movingly bringing them to life. The time I cherished, as the room transformed into an iridescent palace, and then I waited, my ritual. Which painting draw my attention? And there, Vincent's dazzling landscape of a summer's day took hold of me. His gigantic sun, dominant in the sky, spinning out unending rays of gold. Beneath the sun, his cornfield, a bright band of chrome yellow, grown thick, strong, and high. A lone, blue-clad figure, the sower, strides across a furrowed field, speckled and violet and blue, scattering seeds. The infusion of blue and burnished gold, Vincent's favorite colored harmony, imparts to the scene its lasting brilliance. The solitary figure toils under the furnace heat of the sun, the everyman, plowing the earth, planting the seeds. More than ever, I felt the picture's symbolic strength and Vincent's abiding hope. Here, the cyclical condition of life, the toil, the strife, the unending effort to reach the promise of harvest. This painting, a hopeful hymn for regeneration. I looked through tears at the sower in the sun. My tears for Vincent, the artist gone. So,
Wow, that was beautiful. You are really a gorgeous writer, Ron, I have to say.
well, I
Bravo.
love art, and I used to do tours at the National Gallery, and I love bringing art to life for people who maybe weren't accustomed to seeing art for a while. So that I enjoyed that very much.
Well,
One
if
of the
I
favorite,
closed my eyes, I could see the painting without even knowing it the way that you wrote about it.
and that was one of the reasons why I wrote this book. I wanted to bring art to life in a tangible way, that in an interesting way, that people could say, "Hey, maybe I should check art out more often."
And that's your hope for the Dream Collector then, to bring art to life.
Yes.
I love that. Um, are there any other projects that you're working on, or any other historical figures like Van Gogh who has intrigued you so much that you would be inspired to write about them?
Oh, there's so many.
So
The
what's
hard thing
next?
was to leave out a lot of characters that were equally interesting, but I said, "Hey, I'm getting like 100 characters." No, I think what I want to do is uh, explore certain aspects of the novel. I live in Santa Clarita. I'm like a half an hour from Hollywood, so I'd like to do a screenplay
Oh,
um, and adapt some of the more interesting aspects of the book. So that's kind of my future project.
are you is that in the works? Are you making plans for that now?
Well, right now I'm still in promoting this book stage. That's why we're here,
Yes, that
and
is.
uh,
That is why I'm here.
and there are a couple uh, awards that are still pending that there's a possibility that I might win. So I'm there, and also I want to go. What I've been doing, one of my projects is going around to the various art galleries and finding the paintings that are in my book, and then standing in front of the paintings and describing them. So there's still a couple paintings up in New York and Philadelphia that I plan on visiting in May and kind of doing that. And And during this time period, I'm hoping I'm going to get inspired. Like, okay, how can I channel, all of these characters into an interesting film?
I saw a couple of your videos where you're holding up, standing in front of a painting and talking about it, and it was a lot of fun, and I encourage folks to seek those out. They were fantastic. So what do you most enjoy about being an author, and do you have any pearls of wisdom for aspiring authors, particularly in the historical fiction genre?
Well, it was, for me, writing was always in my blood. I mean, when I was in the third grade, they said, well, do a composition. And I came in and I had a 4-page composition where, everybody else had like a couple paragraphs. And I
Yeah,
can remember reading my first, story, and like the third graders all applauded. So it was
that's
in my blood. And, and I'd written several books before this, uh, that were kind of close to getting published, but that didn't work out. And then I had a dry spell, and I thought, well, it's best to kind of just keep experiencing things because I
wonderful.
knew that I would always write eventually. So the advice I give is, if you really love it, just do something you love. Just make sure the subject is something you're really passionate about, and be disciplined. You've got to be disciplined. I mean, my wife would say, my God, you just go in there every day. I mean, and what it was like, there would be a certain time period that I would just have to work. Even if I
Yeah.
just stared at the wall, I wouldn't leave there until a certain time. So discipline and keep writing, and just as important is read. You learn so much from other writers. Uh,
Yes.
so
What
I'm
is your
reading all the time and learning from them. Wow, maybe I could and I steal from them. You steal from the best writers.
Absolutely. What's your favorite, book these days, Ron, or ever?
Well, the more current book is by this Russian writer whose name I can't pronounce, but she wrote the book called Impusium. She's a Polish writer. She won the Nobel
Okay.
Prize. That was the most recent, and that was interesting because it kind of took off from one of my favorite books was Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, and she kind of took Thomas Mann as a starting point and got inspired to write her own book. So, but this my favorite writers in the hierarchy are John Fowles, who young people probably never hear much about him anymore, but they adapted the screenplay, The French Lieutenant's Women, from him, and he wrote the book called The Magus. John Fowles was very influential on me as a young kid, and even before then, Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky.
There's so much passion in Dostoevsky. Um, and that just blew me away as a kid. I read The Brothers Karamazov when I was 14.
Wow.
And then the third writer that doesn't get a lot of attention is Antoine Saint-Exupéry, who was a pilot and died in World War II. But he wrote The Little Prince, which I'm
Yep.
sure everybody remembers. But
Yep.
his other books, too, are just outstanding. And there's it's his poetry, it's his elegance that kind of I like. I'm hoping, like, in my books, I can get some of that elegance from Saint-Exupéry and some of that passion dialogue from Dostoevsky and some of that mystery from John Fowles. That's what I
Well,
hope.
I think you've accomplished that with the Dream Collector books. I really, really do. I mean, the writing is
Mm.
beautiful, and you can definitely feel your passion about art and art history. And we thank you for sharing it with us, John. I called you John. We thank you for sharing that with us, Ron. And we're looking forward to seeing something more, maybe a screenplay. That would be exciting.
Yeah. And I hope I'll be seeing you maybe in New York in May.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you in person in May at book camp. That's going to be a lot of fun. And we can talk some more about your book there if you like. Um, Ron, where can readers purchase book one and two of The Dream Collector and find out a little bit more about you?
Retail stores, I asked for it there, the Barnes& and Noble, and Amazon.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Do you have a website where folks can reach out to
Yes,
you?
ronmeekauthor.com.
Excellent.
Please
That's
go and
couldn't get easier than that.
yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ron. Look forward to seeing you in May. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much. I really
It was a
appreciated this.
Join us next podcast when we speak with Dr. Lindsay Victoria about her book, Goodbye for Now. This is your hostess, Gabby Olzak of the Gab Talks. Until next time, keep on reading.